Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Book as in Books. I saw earlier today a video by Marilyn Maya Mendoza where she talks about banned books. So she's reading a book called Banned Books about banned books. And it sort of made me realize how many reasons there are to ban books. And it sort of also made me realize that I read 3 books this month that were banned at some point or another in the country of their authors. So in North America, it was never banned, but then again, none of these books was originally written in English or French. So it makes the books perhaps harder to get access to. But I'm going to talk about these books that were banned, all for different reasons, as far as I can tell. So the first book that I finished is this one. It's in French. I found the title in English and the cover in English here. So this is This Earth of Mankind by Pramoedya Ananta Toer. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. The author is from Indonesia. And this author spent most of his life in jail for political reasons. He's not a murderer, it's really for political reasons. And that's the reason why his books were banned, including this one. So this is the first of 4 books. It is called the Buru Quartet, B-U-R-U. And the reason it's called that is that Buru is the name of the jail or the island that is kind of a jail where the author was when he wrote it. And I say wrote it, he did not really write it. He sort of composed it mentally and then dictated it to his fellow prisoners because he was an author. The authorities decided to deny him paper and pen. So he had to write the book in his mind, tell it to his fellow prisoners, and it was the fellow prisoners who managed to get it on paper and have it published. And of course, the second it was published, it was banned. So the author managed to be jailed under 3 different regimes. He was first jailed when Indonesia was still a colony of the Netherlands, and the reason he was jailed was that he was a nationalist. He wanted the independence of Indonesia, so he was jailed for that. After Indonesia became independent, it became a democracy for a little while, and he was jailed also by the democracy, so it's not a complete and full democracy, but he managed to get jailed because he took the defense of the Chinese minority in Indonesia, and that did not please the government. And then the democracy got to a quick end, and it was replaced by the dictatorship of General Suharto. And under Suharto, he was jailed because, of course, he was defending democracy, and also he was defending a government that would be more on the left. He was leaning towards the communists. So, of course, he was a dangerous element, so he had to be jailed. So he spent a long time in jail in various sequences. However, he is a giant of literature in his country, and apparently his name was always circulated. He was always a possibility for the Nobel Prize of Literature. He never got it. He died before, but he's a very known author in Indonesia. So this book is a translation, obviously, from Indonesian. That's the thing I wonder. In the book, there are characters speaking multiple languages. It's mentioned, at least in the French translation. Of course, we never know how these things are going to end in multiple languages. But in the French translation that I read, it's frequently mentioned that a character is speaking Malay or speaking Javanese. And even in Javanese, apparently, there's more than one level. There's sort of lower Javanese and higher Javanese, depending on who you're talking to, the status of the person. So I'm wondering, were all these languages in the book? Or at some point people speaking French and Dutch, of course. And I was wondering, are the dialogues in all of these languages, or does the author do like the French translator did and just say that that person spoke in such language and such dialect? So that's something that could be interesting, and that perhaps maybe is lost in translation. I don't know. So what the book is about. So this is the first of a quartet, and we follow the character called Minke, M-I-N-K-E, and he is an 18-year-old indigenous person. And we can see the discrimination established by the Dutch colonizer, not as strict, I would say, as what was done in South Africa. It's always the comparison of apartheid and things like that. Not as strict, because obviously Minke, even though he is an indigenous person, he's allowed to study in a European college, in a Dutch college. But his situation is clearly that of somebody who is inferior. It is clear that he doesn't get the same possibilities, and it is clear that he is not judged by the same rules. He is considered an exception. So obviously, obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, but because he's in that college, that means that he is from the upper classes of Javanese society, because we are on the island of Java. But once he is with Europeans, that upper class doesn't count anymore. He is just another Indian, well, it's not an Indian, another indigenous person like any other. So we can see the clash, the racial clash. And later in the book, we can also see the clash between Dutch laws and local laws, and why Dutch laws, which are supposed to be much more enlightened, much more modern, how cruel they are to the local population, who lives according to their own religious and traditional laws. So there's a clash between the secular laws of the Netherlands and Islam at some point at the end. And we also see in that book the situation of women. I thought that was particularly interesting. Some of the main characters are women. So at the beginning of the book, Minke, our main character who is indigenous, is invited by a friend to visit someone else. So he's not really invited in the house. This is a house that is rather mysterious. It is owned by a rich Dutch man, and it's surrounded by some mystery. Nobody's ever invited there, and nobody really knows why. And somehow Minke's friend is invited by the eldest son living in that house. And once he gets there, Minke sort of realizes, I've been invited here just to be humiliated. They're just going to throw me out. And it turns out that he's not being thrown out. He meets the lady of the house, he meets the younger daughter, and it's sort of immediate friendship. They sort of realize that they are, they recognize themselves. There's sort of a kinship of thought between this woman, the mother, the daughter, and Minke. And it's the friendship and the relation between Minke and these two women that we will follow through the first book. So this is a bit of a coming of age story. Our character is 18-year-old. The time period covered is not very long. It's like a couple of years. So by the end of it, he's not much older. But it is very interesting. So, and I'm going to read the other books in the quartet, and I highly recommend this for anyone looking for a good book. Did I say it's a historical novel? It was set at the end of the 19th century, so in the 1890s. If I remember correctly, it's 1898, so just the very end of the 19th century in Indonesia. So that was interesting. The second book that I read, I borrowed it from the library, so I don't have a copy, and it doesn't exist in English, so it is this. If I translate the title, it would be The Princess of Zanzibar. And the author is Abdelaziz Baraka Sakin, and the author is from Sudan. So this is another historical novel, once again set in 19th century Zanzibar. And this book is currently banned in Kuwait and in Oman. And I'm trying to figure out why, and I don't know. I suppose it's because of the content. The author is not from Kuwait or Oman. The author is from Sudan. However, he's living in France because of his writings. Basically, he has to live in exile. So in a way, his entire work is banned, I suppose, in Sudan. But the reason why this specific book is banned in Kuwait and in Oman, I'm not sure. So there is a sex scene at some point. Is it that? Or is it because the authorities who are from Oman, again, it's a sort of colony, Zanzibar in the 19th century is some sort of colony of Oman, of the kingdom or the king is a sultan. What's the name for that? It's not kingdom, it's sultan, sultanship, sultanate, something. And in this book, the Sultan of Zanzibar is not portrayed in a very flattering light. He's an obese person, rather incompetent, bent on his privileges. He sleeps with a lot of women. He's living off slavery, selling slaves and exploiting slaves. And the main character in this book is, again, a young man. He was captured when he was 11 years old with his father, and they were brought to Zanzibar with a whole bunch of other people from his village. There was some sort of choice that was made. Some people were sold and some people were kept. And our main character, Sundus, and his father were kept to be servants at the court of the Sultan. However, for that, they had to be castrated. We don't see the scene, but we can imagine the scene. There's enough details in there that we can imagine, and it's kind of hard. And the Sultan thinks that everything is perfectly as it should be, that slave women are there for his pleasure, that slave men are there to serve him. They cannot be miserable, they cannot be unhappy, because that's the way it is meant to be. And yeah, perhaps this is the point that is harder for the authorities to accept, more than the few sex scenes that there might be in there. Yeah, I don't know why this book is bad. There are so many reasons to ban a book, and I don't know what's the specific reason that makes this book banned in Oman and Kuwait, among other places. This book was originally written in Arabic. If it's meant to be banned in some other countries, it simply will not be translated in other languages. I don't know, perhaps in Iran it would be banned too, so they will just not bother to translate it, or something like that. I don't know if it would be banned or not, but anyway. So since this book is not translated in English, I won't talk about it any more than that, but just to say that sometimes a book is banned and we don't know why. I guess it always ends up being political reasons, but we cannot be sure. And finally, the last book that I read, it's not the last book that I read, but the last book that I want to talk about. Again, I read it in French because most translations I read in French. So this is The Melody of Vienna by Ernst Lothar. So the cover in English is this one. So this book was banned for the very simple reason, we can see why. The author is Jewish, and the book was written in the 1940s. The author is from Austria, and he managed to escape Austria in time. He was living in the United States during World War II. So his book was published first in English in 1944. And it's only in 1946 that the original German was published in Austria, in Germany. So this is, again, somewhat a historical novel. For us, it's definitely historical. For the time of the writer, it's not quite historical. It starts in the end of the 19th century again. We are just a few months before the suicide of the Crown Prince of Austria. Archduke Rodolph is about to commit suicide with his mistress. And the main character of our book is also a friend of the Crown Prince. She is, however, half Jewish, which kind of causes a problem. There is a lot of anti-Semitism in Vienna, but at the same time, there's a lot of tolerance. So we see this Viennese society kind of evolve from the last days of the monarchy, World War I, and all the way to the Anschluss and Austria's annexation to the German Empire, German Reich by Hitler in 1938. So the last chapters of this book were not historical for the writer at the time and for the reader at the time. It was rather current history. Current history that doesn't exist, but very, very recent history, and maybe not history at all. So, so it covers these 50 years, and the idea is really to portray the society of Vienna and Austria, the idea of Austria, how it evolved from the end of the last few years of the Habsburgs all the way to World War II. So, as I said, our main character is Jewish. When we meet her, she is 22 years old, and she is about to marry a man who is considerably older than her, not that much, about 15 years older than her, and he is the owner of a piano factory, a rather famous piano factory. They are quite rich and living well, so basically she's marrying for money. And she is more or less welcome in this building where the family of her husband lives. So the name of the family is Alt, A-L-T. And that building was built by the great-grandfather or grandfather, and every apartment in the building is lived in by somebody from the family. So a brother of France, or an aunt, or a stepsister, or not a stepsister, sister-in-law, nephews, and it's just a whole bunch of members of a family living in that building. And that is because of the will of the grandfather, I'm just going to say grandfather, he wrote in his will that the building was for the family. It must be used by family members and all of that. So that means everybody's living sort of too close to one another. The idea was nice. Everybody lives in the family and we live for the family. But at the same time, it sort of makes things difficult. And as I said, there's a good dose of anti-Semitism going on. Even though for the sake of appearances, for the sake of family unity, our main character, Henriette, will be accepted in the family. At the same time, there's resistance. I found this book interesting, but I cannot say that I loved it. So of the 3 books that I mentioned today, this is the one that perhaps I like the least. And it's because of the main character. She's kind of empty. She's a very vain woman. And that's the thing. She's not presented as a vain woman. She's presented as someone at the beginning. I said she marries the man for money. So already we can think, okay, well, she's a superficial woman. But no, she wants the money to be able to pay a blackmailer who is about to ruin her father's happiness, who's about to reveal that her mother was unfaithful, and she doesn't want her father to be unhappy. So that's why she marries this man. So we can see at the beginning that she's able of, she's capable of making choices that are difficult. She's capable of not being purely selfish. It's a bit cunning in a way. It's a generosity that is a bit cunning and not very nice to the man she's about to marry. But she's capable of bigger things, of thinking of people other than her. And then at some point, this just completely disappears. She decides that she's unhappy and now she's going to live for happiness. And she becomes this very superficial woman. And even at the end of her life, she's sort of trying to balance, did I do more wrong than right? And now she sees all the wrong that she did. And the list is quite long and we can see it add up as we read the book. And then she said, no, but I did as many good things. And then that's it. The reflection ends there. She's kind of a very silly person in a way, and I never really warmed up to that character. So yeah, that's why I'm sort of on the fence about this character. And she's the main character of the book. The other main character is her son. So of course, the book is in 4 parts, and in the first part, which is about her marrying Franz Alt, we don't really see the son. Well, we don't see him at all. He's not born yet. So in this first part, he's not there. But then in the second part, he's there as an 11-year-old going to college for the first time, not being close to his family that he thinks is perfect, and yes, sort of starting to make his way through life. And we see him all the way to the end. The last scene of the book is with this character. So we follow him as he grows up, as he gets married, as he finds his way in life. He goes to World War I and all of that. So that character is very interesting. That character I really loved. But all the others, there's so many reasons not to like the other characters. And all of them, it's basically for the same reason. They kind of all are superficial. They are living for appearances. So this one is living for her pleasure, but the other ones are living this sort of conservative life for the simple reason that they believe they must show this image of themselves. They must be these people who live by the rules. They must be these people who are fine and proper and having a conservative life. I don't know exactly how to say it otherwise. But they all appear to live for appearances in a way. And yeah, so that I'm a bit mixed emotions about that book, but I'm very happy I read it. I cannot say that I wasted my time, even though it was a very big book. It's about 700 pages. It was totally worth it. I nevertheless enjoyed reading it. A character in this could be the city of Vienna. They live in a building that is on the corner of, the names are in German, I don't remember them, but they are real streets. So I looked at Google Maps and I looked at the building, what it looked like. And yeah, it's a fictitious building, I guess, that the person is talking, that the author is talking about. But I'm pretty sure it looks just exactly like that building in real life. So we can see how Vienna changes through the years. And that is also interesting. And I don't read a lot of books set in Austria, so that was interesting. So yeah, so the book became, I said it at the beginning, the book was banned because the author was Jewish, and at the time it was a good enough reason to ban books. So that's it. That's the 3 banned books that I read this month. And I'm going going to wrap it up here. So thank you everyone for watching. Let me know in the comments, did you read a banned book this month, this year, or this lifetime? And I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!